Welcome to the Crow's Tavern. Tonight, we'll journey back to the time of the Norse people, exploring their villages, customs, and daily lives as we drift toward peaceful sleep together. After our story ends, you'll hear the gentle sounds of a crackling fire that will continue for hours without interruption. These soothing sounds will help guide you into a deep and restful sleep. Now let us begin our journey into the Viking world and allow the ancient tales to carry you towards slumber. Twilight draped itself across the branches of Yggdrasil as Loki stood at the edge of Asgard, gazing outward toward the shifting borders between realms. The trickster god's usual smirk was absent, replaced by an expression of unusual solemnity that would have surprised those who knew him only by reputation. He wore a simple traveling cloak of deep green, unadorned by the gold and embellishments that typically marked his status. Tonight, he sought to pass unnoticed, even by the all-seeing eyes of Heimdall. The message had come to him 3 nights prior, not in words or runes, but in dreams that tasted of frost and whispered with voices thin as ancient parchment. A call from Niflheim, the realm of primordial mist and ice, where the not-quite-dead and the long-forgotten dwelled in twilight consciousness. The dreams showed him a path through swirling fog, leading to a figure whose features remained obscured, but whose presence pulled at memories Loki had buried beneath centuries of mischief and mayhem. He had told no one of his intended journey, not even Thor, who occasionally still trusted him despite ample reasons not to. Especially not Odin, whose wisdom would likely prevent this undertaking altogether. Niflheim was not forbidden to the Aesir, exactly, but neither was it welcoming. It existed in the spaces between living and dead, a realm of preservation rather than decay, where ancient knowledge and forgotten truths hung suspended in its perpetual mist. Loki checked the small leather pouch secured at his belt. Within it lay 3 items: a vial of water from Mimir's well, said to preserve memories even after death, a single golden apple seed from Idun's garden, containing the essence of life and renewal, and a silver needle that had once belonged to Frigg, rumored to be able to stitch together fragments of destiny. He had collected these items discreetly over months, knowing their purposes but not understanding their collective meaning until the dreams began. With a final glance toward the golden spires of Asgard behind him, Loki stepped into the shadows between worlds. He did not use the Bifrost. Heimdall would certainly report such passage to Odin, but instead traversed one of the hidden paths known only to himself and a few others who had studied the secret architecture of Yggdrasil. These paths were dangerous, unstable, more suggestion than substance, but Loki had always excelled at walking the boundaries between what was real and what was possible. When the journey between realms existed outside normal time, it could have been moments or hours before Loki felt the air change around him, growing colder and heavier with moisture. The light dimmed to a muted silver grey that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. He had arrived at the outskirts of Niflheim, where the first tendrils of fog reached out like curious fingers to greet new arrivals. Loki paused, allowing his senses to attune to this new environment. Sound behaved differently here. Even his breathing seemed muffled, as if the very air absorbed noise rather than carrying it. The ground beneath his feet was neither solid earth nor ephemeral cloud, but something in between that shifted subtly with each step. And the mist itself, it moved with purpose, sometimes flowing like water currents, other times hanging motionless, as if frozen in contemplation. "I enter with respect," Loki whispered, speaking the traditional words of passage. not because he particularly cared for tradition, but because Niflheim responded to intention, and for once, his intentions needed to be transparent. The mist before him parted slightly, revealing a path of pale stone that disappeared into the fog several paces ahead. This was the realm's acknowledgement of his presence. Not permission, exactly, but recognition. Loki took a deep breath and stepped forward, conscious of the need to move differently here than he did in the more substantial realms. In Niflheim, haste created disturbance, and disturbance attracted attention from entities better left undisturbed. His boots made no sound as he placed each step deliberately, matching his pace to the slow pulse of the realm itself. The mist closed behind him, erasing any evidence of his passage. Ahead, the path wound through formations of ice that resembled sculptures, or perhaps they were sculptures, memories of forms given temporary substance by the preserving cold of Niflheim. Loki resisted the urge to reach out and touch them, knowing that contact might disrupt whatever fragile magic maintained their existence. As he ventured deeper, the silence of Niflheim became more profound. Not the absence of sound, but something more fundamental. A stillness that existed before sound was conceived. A quiet so complete it seemed to fill rather than empty the spaces it occupied. Loki, who had spent much of his existence creating chaos and noise, found this quality both unsettling and strangely compelling. Here was a form of power he had rarely considered, the strength found in absolute stillness. The path descended gradually, leading him toward what appeared to be a forest of crystalline trees. As he drew closer, Loki realized they were not trees at all, but frozen waterfalls. Hundreds of them, suspended in mid-flow, catching and fracturing the ambient light into prismatic patterns that shifted despite their solid state. Between these glittering formations, the mist flowed more thickly, creating the illusion of shadowed spaces between trunks. Loki paused at the edge of this frozen forest, consulting his memory of the dream path. He needed to find a river, not one of the 9 great rivers that flowed from Fergalmere, but a smaller tributary that the dream had shown him, identifiable by stones along its bank that resembled faces in repose. This river would lead to the dwelling place of the spirit he sought, a forgotten seer whose name had been lost even to most of the Aesir. A soft sound drew his attention, the first distinct noise he had heard since entering Niflheim. A slow, rhythmic dripping, like water falling from icicles in early spring. Loki turned his head slightly, careful not to make any sudden movements. There to his left, between 2 of the frozen waterfalls, a narrow passage descended more steeply. Following his instincts, he moved toward the sound. The passage curved between ice formations, growing narrower until Loki had to turn sideways to continue. The dripping grew louder, more defined, creating a pattern that almost resembled speech, if one could imagine words formed from the language of melting ice. As the passage widened again, Loki found himself standing at the edge of a small hollow, where a stream flowed silently between banks lined with rounded stones. In the diffuse light, the stones did indeed resemble faces, not carved by any hand, but worn into humanoid semblance by millennia of gentle current. This was the place from his dreams. Loki knelt beside the stream, studying its flow. Unlike the waterfalls behind him, this water remained liquid, though it moved with unusual viscosity, more like oil than water. Its surface reflected no light but seemed to absorb it, creating the impression of bottomless depth despite the stream's apparent shallowness. "I seek the whisper seer," Loki said softly, speaking to the stream rather than the air around him. In Niflheim, water remembered and carried messages more reliably than the ever-shifting mist. For several long moments, nothing happened. Loki remained perfectly still, matching his breathing to the rhythm of the dripping he had followed. Patience had never been his virtue, but here, in this place of eternal preservation, he understood that time operated by different rules. What might seem like endless waiting in Asgard was merely a moment's consideration in Niflheim. Gradually, the mist above the stream began to coalesce, gathering itself into a vaguely humanoid shape that hovered just above the water's surface. It had no distinct features, merely suggestions of a form. The impression of long hair flowing in a current that existed beyond physical perception. The hint of a face with deep-set eyes. The outline of robes that might have been magnificent in life but now existed only as memory. You are not expected. The voice seemed to come from the stream itself, bubbling up from its depths rather than from the misty apparition. It was neither male nor female, old nor young, but contained echoes of all these qualities, layered like sediment in ancient rock. "Few expect Loki," he replied, keeping his voice respectfully low. "Yet here I stand, having crossed between realms without using Bifrost or Key." The sound was like ice cracking in spring thaw. The question becomes, why does the trickster seek one who speaks in whispers to the forgotten? What can Niflheim offer one who prefers the chaos of living realms? Loki hesitated. Deception came naturally to him, but he sensed that falsehoods would dissolve in this place of preserved truths, possibly with consequences he couldn't anticipate. "I bring a message," he said finally, "and seek one in return." The misty figure drifted closer, circling Loki with slow deliberation. "You carry items of power," it observed, "gathered with purpose, though perhaps not with permission." There was no accusation in the voice, merely statement of fact. "The Ardo offerings," Loki explained, "for the one who once foretold the twilight of gods before withdrawing from the judgment of Asgard." The mist stilled its movement abruptly. "That name has not been spoken in this realm for centuries." A note of something like curiosity entered the otherwise emotionless voice. What business has Loki's Silvertongue with one so long removed from the concerns of gods and men? Loki reached slowly for the pouch at his belt, telegraphing his movements clearly to avoid any appearance of threat. "May I?" he asked, waiting for permission before proceeding. The misty figure drifted back slightly, which Loki interpreted as assent. He carefully opened the pouch and removed the vial of water from Mimir's well, holding it so that whatever ambient light filtered through the mist caught its crystal surface. "Water from the well of memory," he said, "to restore what time has blurred." He placed it on the bank beside the stream, then removed the golden seed. "Life from Idun's garden, to renew what has grown dormant." This too he placed beside the vial. Finally, he withdrew the silver needle, which gleamed with its own subtle luminescence, and Frigg's instrument, to weave what has become unraveled. The mist swirled more rapidly, expanding to fill the hollow before contracting again, this time taking more definite shape. The figure that now hovered before Loki resembled an elderly woman, still translucent but with distinguishable features. Deep-set eyes that might once have been piercing, high cheekbones hollowed by age, and long silver hair that floated as if under water. "Deity are gifts worthy of a queen," the figure said, her voice stronger now, more distinctly feminine. "Yet I was never royalty, merely a vessel for truths no one wished to hear." "Truth has always been the most royal of qualities," Loki replied. and the least welcome in palaces. A sound like distant laughter rippled through the hollow. Your tongue remains silver, trickster, even in the realm of fog and whispers. The spectral woman regarded the offerings with an expression that suggested both longing and wariness. What message do you bring that requires such precious inducements? Loki straightened his posture, adopting the formal stance of an official emissary, a role he had played before, though rarely with sincere intent. I bring no written words or spoken declarations, he said carefully. The message is in my presence itself. Odin Allfather seeks reconciliation with the seer he once banished. The twilight you foretold approaches, and your voice is needed once more in the halls of Asgard. The mist woman's form flickered like a candle in a draught. Reconciliation? The words seemed to cause her pain. After an eternity in the mists, half alive and half forgotten, Odin remembers my existence and desires my counsel? Her laugh this time held no warmth. And he sends you, Loki, the least trustworthy of messengers. How am I to believe this is not some new deception? Loki felt a familiar irritation rise within him, but pushed it down, maintaining his composure. In Niflheim, emotions created ripples, and ripples attracted attention. I was not sent, he admitted. I came of my own accord, seeking to right an ancient wrong. Now that, the seer said, her form stabilizing somewhat, sounds more like truth, if an incomplete one. What stake has Loki in my return to Asgard's favor? Loki hesitated again, weighing how much to reveal. I too have seen glimpses of what approaches, he said finally. The dreams that led me here showed not just your location, but fragments of what is to come. I saw myself. He trailed off, uncharacteristically at a loss for words. You saw your role in Ragnarok, the seer completed for him, her voice softening slightly. The part you are expected to play in the destruction of all you know. Loki's jaw tightened. I have been cast as villain in stories since time immemorial, he said. But even I have no desire to see the complete unraveling of existence. There must be, he searched for the right word, alternatives. The mist woman drifted closer, studying him with eyes that now seemed to see far more than his physical form. And you believe I might know of such alternatives? That my banishment might have shown me paths invisible to Odin's singular vision? You were exiled for speaking truths that contradicted the Allfather's perception of fate, Loki said. It seems reasonable that your view might encompass possibilities he cannot, or will not, see. For a long moment the seer was silent, her misty form becoming more distinct as she appeared to contemplate his words. The frozen hollow around them seemed to grow quieter, as if Niflheim itself listened for her response. You have changed, trickster, she said finally. There is something different about your chaos, a pattern forming within it, perhaps. Or perhaps merely my perception, clouded by too long in the mists. Before Loki could respond, a soft sound interrupted the stillness. The beating of wings. Both he and the seer looked upward, where a shadow moved against the silvery light filtering through the fog. A large raven circled once above the hollow, before settling on a protruding shard of ice, its black feathers stark against the surrounding whiteness. Juggen, the seer whispered, naming one of Odin's thought ravens. So, the All-Father observes our meeting after all. Loki felt a flash of anger at this intrusion, but quickly mastered it. I did not think I could enter Niflheim without eventual notice, he acknowledged, though I had hoped for more time unobserved. The raven made no sound, merely watching with glossy black eyes that reflected nothing. Whether it was truly Hugin or Munin mattered little. Either of Odin's ravens would report everything back to their master. It seems, the seer said with a hint of dry amusement, that reconciliation may be discussed sooner than either of us anticipated. She turned her attention back to Loki. You have delivered your message through your presence. Now you said you seek one in return. Ask, before our audience grows larger. Loki nodded, acutely aware of the raven's unblinking gaze. I would know my true path, he said simply. Not the role assigned to me in prophecies, or the expectations of those who name me trickster and villain, but the way forward that is uniquely mine to walk. The misty woman's expression grew distant, her form becoming slightly less distinct as she seemed to look through Loki rather than at him. Remove the hood of your cloak, she instructed. Let me see your face fully. Loki complied, pushing back the green hood to reveal his features completely. The sharp cheekbones, the penetrating green eyes, the raven black hair that fell to his shoulders. He remained perfectly still as the seer drifted even closer, her insubstantial form now just inches from his own. She raised a translucent hand, not quite touching his face, but tracing its contours in the air just above his skin. Loki Laufeyson, she whispered, using his true patronymic rather than his adopted Asgardian identity. Child of frost and fire, neither giant nor god, yet somehow both. The question you ask cannot be answered with words. The mist around them thickened suddenly, swirling in patterns that made Loki's eyes strain to follow. The raven shuffled uncomfortably on its perch, but remained watching. I will show you instead, the seer continued, her voice now seeming to come from the mist itself, rather than her increasingly indistinct form. Open your mind to Niflheim's memory, where all paths taken and untaken leave their traces. Loki felt a cool sensation against his temples, as if fingers of fog pressed gently against his skin. He closed his eyes instinctively, surrendering to the contact despite every instinct that usually kept his thoughts carefully guarded from others. Darkness gave way to fragmented visions, not sequential or narrative, but impressionistic glimpses that flashed across his consciousness. He saw himself in countless variations, standing among the Aesir, not as tolerated outsider, but as trusted counselor, wandering the branches of Yggdrasil as a solitary seeker of hidden knowledge, seated beside a throne that was neither Odin's nor that of any giant king, standing at the boundaries between order and chaos, with a foot in each realm, maintaining balance rather than disrupting it. More intimate visions followed, moments of connection with others, some familiar and some unknown. Not the superficial alliances or manipulative relationships he typically formed, but genuine bonds rooted in mutual understanding. In one fragment, he sat with Thor not as reluctant brother, but as true friend, their differences complementary rather than divisive. In another, he stood beside a female figure whose features kept shifting, sometimes Sigyn, sometimes Angerboda, sometimes someone he did not recognize, in a partnership based on equality rather than deception. Throughout these disparate images, Loki noticed a common thread. In none of them was he merely reacting to others' expectations or playing roles assigned by prophecy. In each, he acted from an internal center of purpose, defining his own significance rather than having it defined for him. The visions began to fade, dissolving back into the mist of Niflheim. Loki opened his eyes to find himself still kneeling beside the strange stream, the 3 offerings still arranged on the bank. The seer's form had diminished further, now little more than a suggestion of presence in the swirling fog. "Mate, your answer, trickster," her voice murmured, growing fainter. "Not a single path, but the understanding that paths are created by those who walk them. The role assigned to you in Ragnarok is but one possibility among many, made more likely by belief in its inevitability." Loki absorbed this, feeling both unsettled and oddly lightened. "And what of your return to Asgard?" he asked. "Will you consider Odin's unspoken offer of reconciliation?" The mist stirred slightly, suggesting what might have been a shrug. "I have dwelled in Niflheim's embrace for ages beyond counting," she replied. "Perhaps it is time to speak again among the living, if only to offer perspectives absent from their councils." Her attention shifted to the raven, still perched silently above them. "Tell your master," thought Carrier, "that the Whisper Seer will consider his overture, but on terms yet to be determined." The raven dipped its head once in what appeared to be acknowledgement, though it made no sound. "Take your offerings," the seer instructed Loki. "They have served their purpose in demonstrating intent. Their magic is needed elsewhere now." Loki carefully returned the vial, seed, and needle to his pouch, sensing that their significance had somehow changed, though their physical form remained the same. As he secured the pouch at his belt, he felt a subtle shift in Niflheim's atmosphere, a thinning of the mist in one direction, creating a barely perceptible path leading away from the hollow. "Your way back opens before you," the seer observed, her form now barely distinguishable from the surrounding fog. "I would advise haste without hurry. Others in Niflheim have noticed your presence, and not all are as receptive to visitors as I." Loki rose to his feet, pulling his hood back into place. "I thank you for your counsel," he said formally, inclining his head in respect. "Perhaps we shall meet again in Asgard's halls, under different circumstances." "Perhaps," came the whispered reply, "though nothing is certain in these twilight days, not even the twilight itself." Her voice faded further, becoming indistinguishable from the ambient sounds of the realm. "Remember what you have seen, Loki Silvertongue. The path untrodden does not cease to exist merely because feet turn elsewhere." With those cryptic words, her presence dissipated entirely, leaving only the swirling mist and the silently flowing stream. The raven remained for a moment longer, its dark eyes fixed on Loki, before spreading its wings and disappearing into the silver-grey canopy above. Loki stood motionless for several heartbeats, allowing the encounter to settle within him. Niflheim had already begun to reclaim the hollow, mist thickening around the edges and creeping toward the center where he stood. The path shown to him would not remain open long. Niflheim's geography was as mutable as its misty substance, passages appearing and disappearing according to the realm's own inscrutable logic. He began walking, matching his pace once more to the rhythm of Niflheim itself, deliberate but not hesitant, respectful of the stillness without being captured by it. The path led upward, away from the stream and through formations of ice that resembled nothing from the living realms, structures of impossible geometry and unsettling beauty, preserved in perfect stasis. As he traveled, Loki became aware of eyes watching from the depths of the fog, not the direct observation of the raven, but something more diffuse and ancient. The other inhabitants of Niflheim, those neither living nor truly dead, who drifted through eternity in half-conscious remembrance. They made no move to approach or impede him, but their attention created a palpable weight in the mist around him. "I pass with respect," Loki murmured periodically, repeating the phrase of safe passage. "I disturb nothing, and take nothing that is not freely given." Whether due to these words or the evident approval of the Whisper Seer, the Watchers kept their distance. Occasionally, Loki caught glimpses of them at the periphery of his vision, figures suspended in the fog like insects in amber, some hardly more than suggestions of form, while others appeared almost solid, frozen in postures of contemplation or repose. The path wound through a series of increasingly narrow passages, where the mist grew so thick that Loki could see barely a few paces ahead. He relied more on instinct than sight, feeling his way forward with each careful step. The silence deepened until even his breathing seemed too loud, an intrusion upon the perfect stillness that pressed against him like a physical presence. In this profound quiet, Loki's thoughts turned inward, revisiting the visions the seer had shown him. The multiple possibilities of his existence, the paths not yet taken but still open before him. All his life, his very long life, he had defined himself largely in opposition to others. The outsider in Asgard, the too small giant, the clever one among warriors, the chaos bringer in a realm of order, always drawing identity from contrast rather than essence. What would it mean to choose a path based not on reaction, but on genuine purpose? To act from center rather than periphery? These were uncomfortable questions for one who had elevated adaptation and changeability to an art form. Perhaps that was why he had needed to come to Niflheim, the realm of preservation and memory, to begin considering them. Here, in this place, where nothing was forgotten though much was obscured, the patterns of his existence became more visible than in the clamor of the living realms. Lost in these reflections, Loki almost missed the subtle change in the quality of light filtering through the mist. It had brightened almost imperceptibly, taking on a golden tone that suggested approach to one of the boundaries between realms. He paused, orienting himself carefully. The path had brought him not back to his entry point, but to a different egress entirely. One that would, if he interpreted the signs correctly, deliver him much closer to Asgard than he had begun. This was unexpected, but not unwelcome. It suggested that Niflheim itself, or perhaps the Whisper Seer through some continued influence, was facilitating his return. Such cooperation from a realm normally indifferent to travelers' convenience supported his growing sense that this journey held significance beyond his original intentions. The path ended abruptly at what appeared to be a wall of more densely packed fog, swirling in slow patterns that occasionally parted to reveal glimpses of what lay beyond. A landscape of soft golden light and vague, distant structures that could only be Asgard. Unlike the hidden path he had used to enter Niflheim, this exit sat in plain view, a formally sanctioned connection between realms. Loki understood the implicit message in this route. His return would not be secret. Heimdall would certainly observe his emergence, and questions would follow. The circumspect path of the trickster had been replaced with the direct approach of the acknowledged messenger. It was, he realized, his first opportunity to begin walking one of those alternate paths the seer had revealed, to step forward not as the sneaking outsider, but as one with legitimate purpose. Before he could reconsider, Loki felt a gentle but insistent pressure from behind, as if Niflheim itself urged him forward. The wall of fog before him thinned further, the golden light of Asgard growing more distinct. He took a deep breath, his last taste of Niflheim's ancient, memory-laden air, and stepped through the boundary. The transition between realms was gentler than his entry had been. One moment he stood in swirling mist, the next, his boots pressed against the solid crystal of the Bifrost Bridge, with Asgard's splendor spread before him in full sunlight. The abrupt shift from Niflheim's muted twilight to Asgard's golden radiance momentarily dazzled him, and he raised a hand to shield his eyes while they adjusted. "Welcome back, Loki Odinson." The deep voice of Heimdall greeted him from a few paces away, where the realm's watchman stood in his customary position, golden eyes fixed not on Loki but on the space behind him, watching the boundary to Niflheim seal itself once more. Loki lowered his hood completely, straightening to his full height. "Heimdall," he acknowledged with a nod that was neither subservient nor challenging, merely a recognition between two beings who served Asgard in their own distinct ways. "Your absence was noted," Heimdall continued, his tone carefully neutral, "as was your return path. I imagine very little escapes your notice," Loki replied, managing to keep most of the irony from his voice. He glanced toward the gleaming towers of the city, wondering how many others already knew of his unauthorized journey. "Is the All-Father expecting me?" Heimdall's expression remained impassive. "Odin's ravens returned some time ago," he said, which was answer enough. Loki nodded, squaring his shoulders beneath his travel-worn cloak. "Then I should not keep him waiting." He stepped past Heimdall, who made no move to delay him, and began walking the Rainbow Bridge toward Asgard proper. As he walked, Loki found himself maintaining something of the measured pace he had adopted in Niflheim, not from necessity now, but from choice. The stillness he had experienced in the Mist Realm continued to resonate within him, creating a center of calm that felt unfamiliar, yet somehow right. What conversations awaited in Asgard's halls, what questions and perhaps accusations he would face. These concerns seemed less pressing than they might have before his journey. The path forward would reveal itself one step at a time, just as it had in Niflheim's fall. And for perhaps the first time in his very long existence, Loki felt prepared to walk it with purpose rather than merely cunning, to create his way forward rather than merely react to circumstances or others' expectations. As Asgard's golden gates drew nearer, Loki's hand drifted to the pouch at his belt, feeling the outline of the three objects within, offerings no longer, but perhaps tools for whatever came next. The memory of the seer's final words accompanied him like a mantra. The path untrodden does not cease to exist merely because feet turn elsewhere. His own path stretched before him now, golden in Asgard's perpetual sunlight, leading toward whatever destiny he would forge, rather than merely accept. With the stillness of Niflheim carried within him like a treasure, Loki Laufeyson, or Odinson, or perhaps simply Loki himself, continued forward, one deliberate step at a time. As he approached the gates, Loki noticed how different Asgard appeared to him now. The gleaming spires and burnished domes had always been familiar sights, but after his time in Niflheim's muted palette, the realm eternal seemed almost excessively bright. Each color more intense, each sound more pronounced. Warriors training in the courtyard, their weapons clashing in rhythmic patterns. Craftsmen calling to one another as they went about their business. Children laughing as they chased each other through columned walkways. All formed a tapestry of life that contrasted sharply with the preservation of memory he had just left behind. Yet, rather than finding this vitality overwhelming after Niflheim's stillness, Loki discovered that he could observe it with new appreciation. The patterns of life in Asgard had their own form of beauty, different from but no less meaningful than the frozen perfection of the Mist Realm. Both existed in balance across Yggdrasil's branches, complementary rather than opposed. The guards at the gate straightened as they recognized him, surprise briefly crossing their features before training reasserted itself. They made no move to challenge him, though one nodded respectfully, an uncommon gesture for Loki to receive from Asgard's warriors, who typically regarded him with barely concealed suspicion. "The All-Father awaits in the Western Observatory," the guard informed him, forestalling Loki's need to ask. Loki acknowledged this with a nod of his own, equally respectful, and continued through the gates into the city proper. The Western Observatory was an interesting choice for their meeting. Neither the formal throne room where Odin passed judgments, nor his private chambers where family matters were discussed. The observatory sat at Asgard's edge, overlooking the waters that eventually cascaded into space at the realm's boundary. It was a place of contemplation rather than ceremony, suggesting that whatever conversation awaited would be more nuanced than simple censure. As he traversed Asgard's wide avenues, Loki noticed how people reacted to his passage. Some still eyed him warily, as they always had. The trickster's reputation was centuries in the making, and would not be undone in a day. Others, however, seemed to sense something different about him. A subtle change in bearing or presence that made them look twice. A merchant couple ceased their conversation to watch him pass. A group of young warriors paused in their boasting. A guild of sage workers acknowledged him with expressions of curious assessment. Loki found that he did not mind their scrutiny as he once might have. Neither did he feel compelled to play to their expectations with some small mischief or pointed remark. The stillness he carried from Niflheim created a space between impulse and action that felt strangely liberating, not a constraint on his nature, but an expansion of possibility. The western path rose gradually toward Asgard's outer reaches, where the eternal city's noise diminished and the sound of distant waterfalls grew more prominent. Elaborate buildings gave way to simpler structures, then to gardens and open spaces where the boundary between cultivated beauty and wild nature blurred. The observatory stood alone on a jutting promontory, a graceful structure of gold and crystal that captured and refracted the light of stars and distant realms. Loki paused at the foot of the path leading to its entrance, taking a moment to compose himself. He was not nervous, exactly. Such an emotion seemed distant after Niflheim's equalizing stillness, but he recognized the significance of what would follow. The conversation with Odin would be unlike those they had shared in the past, shaped by what each of them had learned in the trickster's absence. He climbed the path at the same measured pace he had maintained since returning from Niflheim, neither hurrying toward nor delaying the inevitable. The observatory's doors stood open, releasing a pool of warm golden light into the deepening twilight. Beyond them, Loki could see a solitary figure standing at the far side of the circular chamber, hands clasped behind his back, gazing outward toward the cosmos. "Enter, Loki," Odin said without turning, his deep voice carrying easily across the space between them. "I would hear of your journey." Loki stepped into the observatory, allowing the doors to close silently behind him. The chamber's interior was both simple and profound. A circular space with a domed ceiling that somehow captured and displayed the stars and nebulae surrounding Asgard. The floor bore intricate inlays depicting Yggdrasil and the 9 realms, crafted from materials that subtly shifted to reflect the current state of each domain. Niflheim's representation gleamed with a silvery opacity that seemed appropriate to its misty nature. Odin turned as Loki approached the center of the chamber. The All-Father wore simple robes rather than his formal armor, and Gungnir was nowhere in sight. Another indication that this meeting was neither trial nor tribunal. His single eye studied Loki with an expression that combined assessment, curiosity, and something that might almost have been approval. "You look changed," Odin observed after a moment of silence. "Niflheim has left its mark upon you, though not in any way I might have predicted." Loki inclined his head slightly, neither confirming nor denying this observation. "The realm of mist preserves more than just ancient spirits," he said. "It holds truths that cannot be spoken in places of noise and action." A hint of a smile touched Odin's lined face. "Indeed, which is why those who visit rarely return unchanged, if they return at all." He gestured to a simple bench positioned to overlook the western expanse of stars. "Sit with me. Tell me of the Whisper Seer and what passed between you." Loki joined Odin on the bench, maintaining the inner stillness that had become his anchor. "She remembers you," he said simply. "After all these centuries, after dwelling half alive in Niflheim's embrace, she recalls the one who sent her there." Odin's expression remained impassive, though something flickered briefly in his single eye. Regret, perhaps, or simply acknowledgement of a past that could not be undone. "Memory is the province of Niflheim," he said. "Nothing is truly forgotten there, merely preserved in different forms." He turned slightly to face Loki more directly. "Did she speak of returning?" "She said she would consider your overture," Loki replied, watching Odin carefully. "On terms yet to be determined." Odin's gaze drifted back to the stars. "Terms. Yes, that would be her way. She always understood the value of negotiation, even before..." He trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. Loki waited, allowing silence to fill the space between them. In Niflheim, he had learned the power of unforced conversation, how meaning often emerged from the pauses between words, rather than the words themselves. After what might have been minutes, or merely moments, Odin spoke again. "You were not sent as my emissary," he observed. "Yet you presented yourself as such to one who can see through deceptions, far more skilled than even yours." There was no accusation in his tone, merely curiosity. Loki considered his response carefully. "I went seeking answers," he admitted finally. "The dreams that led me to her showed fragments of what approaches, the twilight that has been foretold. I saw myself as others expect me to be, playing the role assigned in prophecies and legends." He paused, sorting through impressions and memories from his journey. "But she showed me alternatives, paths where destiny might be shaped rather than merely fulfilled." Odin's attention sharpened noticeably. "What alternative?" Loki shook his head slightly. "Not specific futures or decisive actions. Rather, she revealed the possibility of choice itself. That prophecy creates likelihood, but not certainty. That roles may be accepted, rejected, or transformed according to one's true nature, rather than others' expectations. A dangerous perspective," Odin murmured, though whether he meant dangerous to established order or dangerous in offering false hope, Loki could not tell. "Truth often is," Loki replied, borrowing the Whisper Seer's earlier sentiment, "which is why it finds little welcome in palaces." To his surprise, Odin chuckled, a sound rarely heard in recent centuries as the weight of rulership pressed heavier upon the All-Father's shoulders. You speak more boldly since your return, he noted, yet somehow with less defiance. The contradiction intrigues me. Loki found himself smiling faintly in response. Niflheim teaches paradox through proximity to death without decay. Perhaps something of its nature has rubbed off on me. Perhaps. Odin's expression grew more serious. The raven reported that you carried items of power as offerings. Water from Mimir's well, a seed from Idun's garden, and, he hesitated, a needle that once belonged to Frigg. The slight emphasis on the last item carried layers of meaning. Frigg's possessions were sacred to Odin, tangible connections to the wife he had loved beyond measure. For Loki to have acquired one, even something as seemingly trivial as a needle, represented either grave transgression or profound purpose. Demons were gathered with intent, Loki acknowledged, though I did not fully understand their collective meaning until the dreams began. And now? Odin asked, watching him closely. Loki's hand moved to the pouch at his belt, though he did not open it. Now I believe they represent aspects of what was shown to me in Niflheim. Memory that preserves truth, life that continues to grow and adapt, and the means to weave new patterns from existing threads of fate. Odin was silent for several long moments, his gaze now distant, as if seeing across time rather than merely space. The Norns weave as they must, he said finally, but perhaps the tapestry allows for more variation than even I have believed possible. The admission, for it was an admission of potential error or at least limited perspective from one who rarely acknowledged either, hung between them, significant in its implications. If Odin himself could consider alternatives to the prophecies that had shaped Asgard's preparations for millennia, then truly the foundations of certainty were shifting. "Will you send for her?" Loki asked, returning to the original subject of their conversation. The whisper seer. Odin rose from the bench, moving to stand at the observatory's edge, where the view of stars was clearest. "Not yet," he decided. "Let her consider what your visit represents. Sometimes the space between offer and acceptance is where wisdom ripens." Again, Loki noted the parallel to Niflheim's own nature, the value of pause, of stillness, of time for reflection. Perhaps Odin understood more about the Mist Realm than he had previously acknowledged. "And what of your wandering son?" Loki asked, the question emerging before he had fully formed the thought behind it. "What place awaits him in Asgard, now that he returns neither triumphant nor defeated but merely changed?" Odin turned back toward him, something like genuine warmth in his expression. "That," he said, "may depend on what change you choose to embrace or discard. Asgard has many needs as the realms shift toward uncertainty. Some that might be served by skills you have long possessed, others by wisdom newly acquired." It was not a direct answer, but Loki had not expected one. The relationship between them had always been complex. Father and adopted son, king and subject, mentor and occasionally rival. Simple declarations had never been their way. "I will consider what Niflheim has taught me," Loki said, rising to his feet. "And what may be built upon that foundation?" Odin nodded, seemingly satisfied with this response. "Do so. We will speak again when thoughts have settled, like silt in clear water." He gestured toward the observatory doors, which silently opened once more. "Rest now. The journey between realms taxes even the strongest spirit." Loki recognized the dismissal, courteous though it was. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect rather than subservience, and turned to leave. At the threshold he paused, looking back at Odin's solitary figure against the backdrop of stars. "She remembered your true name," he said softly. "The one spoken before you became All-Father. She whispered it like a prayer, or perhaps a key." Odin stilled, his back to Loki, but something in his posture suggested both tension and longing. "Some names are best left in memory," he replied after a moment. "Preserved, but not spoken aloud, where the present might be reshaped by their power." Loki nodded, though Odin could not see the gesture. "As you say." He stepped through the doorway into the cool evening air of Asgard, leaving the All-Father to his contemplation of stars and fates and names long unuttered. The walk back through Asgard's quieting streets gave Loki time to reflect on the conversation and its implications. Odin had neither condemned nor praised his unauthorized journey to Niflheim, had neither rejected nor embraced the possibility of alternate paths through the prophesied twilight. The All-Father's responses had been measured, thoughtful, perhaps even influenced by his own growing awareness that established certainties might no longer be as fixed as once believed. By the time Loki reached his own chambers in a quieter section of the palace, night had fully descended upon Asgard. Servants had lit lamps and left fresh clothing, but otherwise the rooms remained as he had left them. Books and scrolls arranged in organized chaos, magical implements carefully stored in cabinets of various woods chosen for their particular resonances. Windows open to the night air. He moved through the space slowly, reacquainting himself with its details after his time away. Though his journey to Niflheim had not been lengthy by objective measurement, it had created a sense of distance greater than mere time could account for. The Loki who had left these chambers in secrecy and purpose was not quite the same as the one who returned, with stillness in his core and possibility in his mind. Removing his travel-worn cloak, Loki carefully extracted the pouch from his belt and placed it on a small table of dark wood. He opened it, removing each item with deliberate care. The crystal vial of water from Mimir's well, the golden seed from Idun's garden, and Frigg's silver needle, which caught the lamplight and seemed to hold it for a moment before releasing it again. The objects, unremarkable in appearance, yet profound in their connections and potential. They had served their immediate purpose in demonstrating the seriousness of his intent to the Whisperseer, but Loki sensed they held significance beyond that initial use. Like the visions he had been shown in Niflheim, these items represented aspects of what might yet be: memory, renewal, and the weaving of new patterns within the existing fabric of fate. He arranged them in a triangle on the table's surface, studying the relationship between them. After a moment's consideration, he reached for a small wooden box inlaid with runes of containment and preservation. Opening it, he carefully placed the three objects inside, where they would remain secure until their purpose became clear. That task complete, Loki moved to the largest window of his chambers, which overlooked a section of Asgard's gardens and, beyond them, the glittering expanse of stars. The night was clear, each celestial light distinct against the velvet darkness. Beyond the familiar constellations that had shone above Asgard since time immemorial, faint auroras shimmered at the edges of perception, ribbons of color that marked the boundaries between realms, visible only under certain conditions of atmosphere and awareness. Loki stood watching these ethereal displays, allowing their subtle movements to lull his mind toward rest. The stillness he had learned in Niflheim remained with him, creating a foundation of calm beneath the naturally quick currents of his thoughts. For perhaps the first time in centuries, he felt no immediate urge toward action or reaction, no scheme demanding implementation, no scheme requiring redress, no expectation demanding either fulfillment or subversion. In this unusual state of equilibrium, Loki found himself considering the figure of the Whisper Seer more closely. She had been banished for speaking truth that contradicted Odin's understanding of fate. Yet now the Allfather seemed willing to consider her return. What had changed in the intervening centuries? Was it merely the approach of Ragnarok creating desperation for any advantage, any alternative perspective? Or had Odin himself evolved in his understanding, coming to recognize that multiple truths might coexist where prophecy was concerned? Questions without immediate answers, yet Loki found he could hold them in mind without frustration. Niflheim had taught him the value of suspended judgment, of allowing understanding to emerge in its own time rather than forcing conclusions. Perhaps this, too, was part of the change that both he and Odin had sensed in him, a willingness to exist in the space between certainties, finding strength in possibility rather than definition. As night deepened around him, Loki finally turned from the window and prepared for rest. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and revelations as Asgard adjusted to his return and he to the renewed complexity of life among the Aesir. There would be questions from Thor, curiosity from Heimdall, wariness from those who had always mistrusted his motives. The paths he might walk remained multiple, their destinations unclear. Yet as he settled into sleep, Loki carried with him a sense of potential previously unfamiliar, not the potential for mischief or disruption that had always been his trademark, but the potential for genuine choice, independent of others' expectations or prophecy's demands. Niflheim's mists had cleared to reveal not one predetermined future but many possible ones, each waiting to be shaped by conscious intent rather than resigned acceptance. The gates of Asgard had opened before him, and Loki had passed through them without hesitation, leaving Niflheim's mists behind but carrying its most valuable lesson within, that in perfect stillness, transformation becomes possible. And transformation had always been his greatest gift, though perhaps never before applied to himself with such conscious intent. Whatever awaited him in the days to come, judgment or opportunity, censure or recognition, Loki would meet it not as the expected trickster, but as something both more and less predictable, himself, still in the process of becoming. As Loki drifted into sleep in his chambers, the lessons of Niflheim still resonating within him, the cosmic threads of Yggdrasil continued their eternal weave across the 9 realms. The stillness he had discovered in the realm of mist and memory was but one aspect of the world tree's vast tapestry. Elsewhere, in realms of light and growth, of knowledge and dreams, other stories unfolded in their own rhythms. The silver light of distant stars filtered through Asgard's night, carrying whispers from across the cosmos. Among these celestial murmurs came hints of activity from Vanaheim, the sister realm to Asgard, home to the Vanir gods of fertility, wisdom, and prescience. There, where forests grew lush and deep, where rivers ran with waters of insight, another tale was taking shape beneath canopies of ancient trees whose roots drank from wells of dreams. While Niflheim preserved in stillness, Vanaheim transformed through growth. Where one realm taught the value of silence and memory, the other revealed the power of vision and becoming. Yet both shared the profound magic that exists in the spaces between realms and beings, between what is and what might be, between waking and dreaming. And so, as one journey through mist and memory concludes, another begins amidst the verdant splendor of Vanaheim, where dreams take form and duels are fought not with weapons of steel, but with visions that reshape reality itself. And now, we journey from the realm of fog and whispers to a place where dreams hold tangible power, where thoughts bloom like flowers, and where battles are won through insight rather than might. Close your eyes and follow the branches of Yggdrasil as they lead us to our next tale. The amber light of late afternoon filtered through the ancient ash trees of Vanaheim, casting dappled patterns across the moss-covered ground. Loki moved through the forest with uncharacteristic caution, his usual confidence tempered by unfamiliarity with this realm of growth and dreams. Unlike the golden halls of Asgard or the primal wilderness of Jotunheim, Vanaheim possessed a quality that defied easy understanding, a subtle magic that permeated every leaf, stone, and whisper of wind. Ridiculous errand, Loki muttered to himself, pushing aside a curtain of luminescent vines that seemed to reach for him with gentle curiosity. Fetch a branch from the dreaming tree, Odin says. A simple task, he claims, yet sends me to the one realm where even my silver tongue holds less sway than elsewhere. The truth, though Loki would admit it to none, was that Vanaheim unsettled him. Here the Vanir gods held dominion, their magic focused on fertility, dreams, and prophecy, rather than the warfare and feast hall revelry of the Aesir. Here, Loki's carefully crafted masks and illusions sometimes slipped without his intention, revealing glimpses of truths he preferred to keep hidden. Still, a request from the All-Father could not be ignored, particularly when delivered with that particular gleam in Odin's single eye that suggested he knew more about the consequences of refusal than he cared to share. And so Loki found himself deep in Vanaheim's enchanted forest, seeking a tree that was said to exist simultaneously in the waking world and the realm of dream. The path ahead forked unexpectedly, one trail continuing through the dense woodland, while the other led toward a clearing bathed in unusually bright light. Loki hesitated, studying both options with the practiced eye of one who had navigated countless labyrinths, both physical and metaphorical. The darker path seemed more direct, but something about the quality of light in the clearing tugged at his attention. Well then, he decided, adjusting course toward the illuminated space. When in doubt, choose the option that offers better visibility for mischief. As Loki stepped into the clearing, the air around him changed subtly, becoming lighter, somehow more permeable. Motes of golden pollen drifted lazily through sunbeams that seemed to stretch and compress in ways that defied ordinary physics. At the center of the space stood a single tree, unlike any Loki had encountered in his extensive travels across the 9 realms. Its trunk spiraled upward in an impossible helix, bark flowing like liquid silver that never quite settled into a fixed pattern. Branches extended in all directions, some bearing leaves of emerald green, others sporting plumage of iridescent blue, and still others draped with flowering vines that bloomed and withered and bloomed again in the span of heartbeats. Roots broke the surface of the ground before diving back beneath, creating a complex knotwork pattern that shifted whenever Loki looked away and back again. The dreaming tree, Loki breathed, a rare moment of genuine awe overcoming his customary skepticism. At least Odin didn't send me on a fool's errand after all. He approached cautiously, circling the tree once to examine it from all angles. No obvious dangers presented themselves, though with Vanir magic, the greatest threats were rarely obvious. Still, a simple branch was all he needed. Surely a being of such magnificence would hardly notice the loss of one small limb. Loki selected his target, a modest branch at approximately his own height, bearing leaves that shifted between silver and pale blue as they trembled in a breeze he couldn't feel. He reached out, fingers almost brushing the smooth surface of the wood. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," a voice like wind through autumn leaves suggested from somewhere behind him. Loki whirled, instinctively drawing the dagger he kept concealed in his sleeve. The clearing appeared empty save for himself and the tree, yet the voice had been unmistakable. "Show yourself," he commanded, injecting confidence into his tone despite the prickle of unease crawling along his spine. "I come on behalf of Odin Allfather, and I will not be deterred by disembodied warnings." Soft laughter rippled through the clearing, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "Always so quick to brandish weapons, trickster. Has your time among the Aesir truly changed you so much? There was a time when words were your preferred blade." The air before Loki shimmered, coalescing gradually into a figure that appeared neither entirely solid nor completely insubstantial. A being stood, or perhaps floated, before him, clad in robes that mimicked the colors of the dreaming tree itself. Where a face should have been, a mask of polished wood covered all features save for eyes that shifted hue with each blink, never settling on a single color. "I am Mirven, guardian of the Dreamways." The figure introduced itself with a formal inclination of its head. "And you are Loki Silvertongue, whose reputation precedes him across all realms of existence." Loki returned his dagger to its hidden sheath, recognizing that physical weapons would offer little advantage against such a being. Instead, he offered a bow of precisely calculated depth, respectful enough to acknowledge the entity's obvious power, yet not so deep as to suggest subservience. "You have me at a disadvantage," Loki admitted with a disarming smile. "Your name is not among those I learned when studying the denizens of Vanaheim." "Huh? Perhaps because I am not precisely a denizen," Mervyn replied, gesturing, with long, slender fingers that seemed to leave faint traces of light in the air. "I am more accurately described as a function given form, a purpose granted awareness. The veneer shaped me from dream stuff and memory to serve as caretaker for spaces where waking and dreaming overlap." "Fascinating," Loki responded, though his attention had already returned to the tree and his interrupted mission. "And I suppose your function includes preventing visitors from collecting souvenirs from your remarkable tree." Mervin's mask tilted slightly, giving an impression of amused consideration despite its static features. "My function includes preventing foolhardy beings, even those of divine heritage, from unknowingly wandering into realms from which they may never return." The dreaming tree is not merely a curious botanical specimen, Loki Odinson. It is a nexus, a gateway between states of consciousness. "Then perhaps you might assist me," Loki suggested, edging subtly closer to the tree. "Odin Allfather requires a branch from this very tree for purposes he has not seen fit to share with me. I am merely his messenger in this matter." "Odin seeks no branch," Mervyn stated with absolute certainty. "The Wanderer would not send anyone, even his blood brother's child, on such an errand without proper preparation and warning. You have been misled, or you mislead yourself." Loki's expression flickered briefly with genuine surprise before smoothing into practiced neutrality. "Are you suggesting the Allfather lied about his purpose in sending me here? That would be most unlike him." The sarcasm in his voice was delicate, but unmistakable. "I suggest nothing," Mervyn corrected. "I merely observe what is, and what is currently is a trickster god standing on the threshold of a dream world for which he is woefully unprepared, reaching for a key he does not understand how to use. Irritation flashed through Loki. Whether Odin had indeed sent him on this fool's errand with full knowledge of the consequences, or whether the All-Father had assumed Loki would exercise more caution, the situation had become needlessly complicated. Still, he had not earned his reputation by surrendering at the first sign of resistance. Perhaps I understand more than you credit, Loki countered smoothly. Perhaps I seek not just any branch, but specifically one that might allow a skilled practitioner to navigate the boundaries between waking and dreaming with greater ease. Mirven remained silent for several moments, eyes shifting from amber to deep purple as they studied Loki with unsettling intensity. You speak with conviction, the Dream Guardian finally acknowledged. Yet conviction is not the same as comprehension. Still, there may be wisdom in granting you what you seek, if only to illuminate the depths of your misunderstanding. Before Loki could respond to this cryptic statement, Mirven made a flowing gesture toward the dreaming tree. A branch, the very one Loki had selected, detached itself without visible breakage, floating gently through the air to hover between them. Take it, Murdoch invited, if you truly believe this is what you came for. Suspicion warred with desire in Loki's mind. The ease of this victory suggested a trap, yet to retreat now would accomplish nothing. After a moment's hesitation, he reached out and grasped the branch firmly. Immediately the world around him shifted, not violently or suddenly, but with the inexorable grace of a tide changing direction. The clearing remained visible, as did Mervyn and the dreaming tree, but they now seemed to exist behind a veil of softly rippling light. Simultaneously, other elements intruded upon Loki's perception. Structures of impossible architecture floating among clouds that formed perfect geometric patterns. Gardens growing in mid-air with roots reaching toward a sky filled with multiple moons of varying sizes and colors. What trickery is this? Loki demanded, though his voice sounded distant even to his own ears, as if traveling across a much greater distance than the few paces separating him from Mervyn. No trickery, the Dream Guardian assured him, its form now somehow more substantial than the surrounding landscape. Merely consequence. You have what you reached for, a gateway between waking and dreaming, and as one unversed in the proper rituals of passage, you have slipped fully into the realm of dreams rather than maintaining the precarious balance required to stand at the threshold. Understanding dawned with unwelcome clarity. I am trapped in a dream, Loki stated flatly, not bothering to phrase it as a question. More accurately, you are caught in the realm sleep of Vanaheim, Murdoch corrected, a state deeper than ordinary dreaming, where the consciousness exists entirely within landscapes shaped by both external and internal forces. The Vanir themselves may enter and exit such states at will, having mastered the necessary disciplines over countless generations. And those not of Vanir birth? Loki asked, already suspecting the answer. You may find the journey more challenging, Mervyn acknowledged. Though not impossible, particularly for one with your unique talents. Loki released the branch, which dissolved into motes of golden light that swirled around his fingers before dispersing. Explain, he commanded, his tone hardening as he fought against the disorientation of his altered surroundings. You have entered the dreaming realms through one of its deepest points, Mervyn explained, beginning to move through the shifting landscape with the fluid grace of one perfectly adapted to its nature. To return to the waking world, you must find your way back to a thinner boundary, a place where dream and reality overlap sufficiently for passage between them. And where might I find such a place? Loki inquired, falling into step beside the Dream Guardian despite his frustration at being led rather than leading. Mervyn gestured toward the impossible horizon, where towers of crystal and cloud intermingled beneath a sky that couldn't decide on a single color. Somewhere out there, a doorway exists that will respond to your specific resonance. The challenge lies in finding it among infinite possibilities. Simply wandering aimlessly through dreamscapes hardly seems efficient, Loki observed dryly. Indeed not, Merivian agreed, with another of those head tilts that somehow conveyed amusement despite the wooden mask. Which is why I offer an alternative, a contest of sorts, a duel, if you prefer more martial terminology. Loki's interest sharpened. Competitions, challenges, wagers, these were domains in which he had extensive experience and frequent success. What manner of duel would this be? I note you carry no visible weapons. In the realm of dreams, imagination is both weapon and shield, Mervyn explained. I propose a duel of dreamcraft, a contest of creation and control. Should you prove yourself sufficiently adept, I shall guide you directly to your exit point, rather than leaving you to wander. Loki considered the offer, weighing obvious risks against uncertain rewards. And the rules of this engagement? 3 challenges, Mervyn specified, each testing different aspects of dream manipulation. No physical harm will come to either participant, though I cannot promise the same for pride or dignity. Victory requires succeeding in at least 2 of the 3 challenges. And if I refuse, Loki asked, more to establish his autonomy than out of genuine consideration, then you are welcome to explore the infinite dream realms at your leisure, Modin replied pleasantly. Perhaps in a century or 2, you might stumble upon a suitable exit. Time passes differently here, after all. The choice, when framed this way, seemed obvious. Yet Loki had survived countless dangerous situations by examining all options before committing himself. What assurance do I have that you will honor our agreement should I prove victorious? The same assurance I have that you will depart peacefully, rather than attempting to exploit dreamcog knowledge for mischief upon your return, Mervyn countered. Which is to say, none whatsoever. We proceed on faith, or not at all. A laugh escaped Loki, despite his predicament. Faith is not typically listed among my virtues. Perhaps not, Murreville acknowledged. But pragmatism certainly is. And pragmatically speaking, I represent your most efficient path homeward. Loki could hardly argue with this assessment. Very well, he conceded with a theatrical bow. I accept your challenge, Dream Guardian. Let this duel of imagination commence. The landscape around them responded immediately to Mervyn's unspoken command, dissolving into swirling mist before reforming as a vast amphitheater. Tiered seating surrounded a central arena of polished stone, though no spectators occupied the countless empty benches. Above, the sky had transformed into a dome of shifting constellations that formed and reformed into patterns representing all 9 realms. Our first challenge, Mervyn announced, gliding to one side of the arena, tests stability and foundation. Before engaging in complex dreamcraft, one must establish mastery over basic reality. With a graceful gesture, the Dream Guardian caused the perfectly flat surface of the arena to ripple like disturbed water. From these ripples emerged a simple wooden table upon which sat 3 objects: an apple, a goblet, and a small knife. Create a chair, Mervyn instructed. Not merely an illusion, but a fully realized dream construct, capable of supporting weight, transmitting sensation, and maintaining its integrity when interacted with. Loki raised an eyebrow. You begin with a challenge fit for novices? I have created illusions capable of fooling Heimdall himself. Illusion is not creation, Mirravin corrected gently. A true dream construct must exist in multiple dimensions of consciousness simultaneously. Loki approached the table with measured confidence. He focused on creating a chair of elegant design with intricate knotwork patterns. For a brief moment, the chair appeared exactly as he had imagined it, perfect in every detail. But almost immediately, inconsistencies became apparent. The proportions shifted, patterns began to unravel, and the legs grew uneven. You focus exclusively on appearance rather than essence, Mirravin observed. The chair fails because you have given it no purpose beyond looking like a chair. A chair's purpose is self-evident in its form, Loki argued, frustration edging his voice. Is it? Does a throne serve the same purpose as a rocking chair? Form follows purpose, not the reverse. Loki considered this advice. What was a chair's essence? Support, stability, rest, a place from which to observe. These concepts flowed through Loki's mind, replacing his rigid visual specifications. The distorted chair dissolved completely. Loki closed his eyes, concentrating not on what a chair should look like, but on what a chair should be. When he opened his eyes and extended his hand again, the chair formed from its core outward. First a sense of support and stability, then the structure to translate those qualities into form. The result was simpler than his first attempt, yet possessed a solidity that the ornate version had lacked. Better, Mirven acknowledged. Now, demonstrate its functionality. Loki circled the table slowly, studying his creation from all angles before cautiously lowering himself onto its seat. The chair accepted his weight without the slightest wobble or creak, feeling as solid as any physically crafted furniture in Asgard's halls. He ran his fingers along the armrests, noting with satisfaction the smooth texture of the wood and the subtle warmth it seemed to radiate. Details he had intended but not consciously specified. Love it. An acceptable first effort, Mirabin concluded, though Loki detected a note of genuine approval beneath the measured assessment. You learn quickly when you set aside preconceptions. Is that not the essence of the trickster? Loki responded, rising from the chair with newfound appreciation for the complexity of dreamcraft. To see beyond established patterns, to find paths others overlook. Indeed, Muraben agreed, which makes our second challenge particularly appropriate. With another of those flowing gestures, the Dream Guardian transformed the amphitheater entirely. The rigid structure of stone seating and formal arena dissolved, replaced by an expansive garden unlike any in the waking realms. Paths of luminescent pebbles wound between flowering plants, whose blossoms changed color with each passing breeze. Fountains defied gravity, their waters flowing upward from basins to spouts. Butterflies, with wings of stained glass, flitted between crystal trees, bearing fruit that glowed with inner light. Miran's second challenge tests adaptation and improvisation, Mervyn explained as they walked side by side along one of the winding paths. Dreams are rarely static environments, particularly those shaped by multiple consciousnesses. The skilled dreamwalker must navigate constant change while maintaining their own identity and purpose. They arrived at a circular clearing where the luminescent path spiraled inward to a central platform of polished malachite. Standing upon this platform was a perfect replica of Loki himself, precise in every detail from the curve of his smile to the specific shade of his eyes. Interesting, Loki commented, circling his doppelganger with undisguised fascination. A mirror of self-reflection, perhaps? Or a more literal challenge of self-confrontation? Neither, Mervyn corrected, gesturing toward the duplicate. This is merely a canvas awaiting transformation. For this challenge, you must create a being capable of independent thought and action within the dreamscape. A temporary consciousness distinct from your own. Loki's eyes narrowed slightly. You ask me to create life? I ask you to create the illusion of life, Mervyn clarified. A dream construct with sufficient complexity to simulate consciousness, not a truly independent soul. Think of it as an elaborate puppet whose strings are manipulated by the dreaming mind rather than the conscious hand. His explanation did little to diminish the magnitude of the challenge. Even among Asgard's most accomplished sorcerers, the creation of seemingly autonomous constructs remained an achievement few could claim. Still, Loki had never been one to shy away from demonstrating his exceptional talents. Very well, he agreed, approaching his motionless duplicate. Though I question the wisdom of allowing me to create an independent version of myself, however temporary its existence might be. One Loki is trouble enough for most realms, as Thor would enthusiastically attest. In the dream realms, actions have consequences of their own nature, Mervyn replied cryptically. Create wisely. Loki considered his options carefully. Creating a copy of himself seemed both obvious and potentially problematic. His own thought patterns were complex enough without attempting to replicate them in a secondary construct. A simpler consciousness would be more manageable, yet must still demonstrate sufficient sophistication to satisfy Miravan's requirements. An idea formed. Reaching out, Loki placed his hand upon the duplicate's chest. Become not what I am, he instructed the dream stuff, but what I have known. The figure began to transform, features flowing like wax as its height diminished slightly. The elegant attire of Asgard's royal court shifted into more practical leathers and furs. Dark hair lightened to golden blonde, and the lean physique broadened with warrior's muscle. Within moments, a perfect representation of Thor stood before them, from his confident stance to the hammer Mjolnir hanging at his belt. Interesting choice, Mervyn observed neutrally. Familiar territory, Loki explained, with a casual shrug that belied the concentration required to maintain the transformation. I've spent centuries studying my brother's predictable behaviors and limited range of responses. Replicating his consciousness, even in simplified form, requires minimal creative effort. Now came the more challenging aspect, imbuing this form with apparent autonomy. Loki circled the Thor construct slowly, focusing on the essence of his brother as he understood it. Courage bordering on recklessness, strength tempered occasionally by compassion, loyalty to family and friends, directness to the point of bluntness, a preference for action over contemplation. These qualities and more Loki wove into the construct, drawing from countless interactions and observations accumulated over their long, complicated relationship. The Thor figure remained motionless throughout this process, eyes closed as if sleeping upright. Only when Loki completed his circuit and stood once more before the construct did he speak the final element of his creation. Awaken, brother, he commanded softly. Find yourself in a strange realm, as you have so many times before. The effect was immediate and startling, even to Loki himself. The Thor construct's eyes opened, showing the exact shade of blue that characterized the real Thunder God. Its posture shifted subtly, weight redistributing in the particular way Thor stood when assessing unfamiliar surroundings. A furrow appeared between blonde brows as confusion gave way to recognition. Loki. The construct spoke, its voice a perfect reproduction of Thor's resonant tones. What mischief have you wrought now? This is clearly not Asgard. The figure turned, taking in the dream garden with obvious bewilderment before focusing on Mervyn with immediate suspicion. And who is this masked figure? Explain yourself, brother. Loki couldn't suppress a smile of satisfaction at the construct's thoroughly Thor-like reaction. Peace, Thor. We find ourselves guests in the dream realms of Vanaheim, engaged in a contest of skill and wit. This is Mervyn, guardian of these realms, and my current competitor. The Thorthgard's hand moved instinctively to Mjolnir's handle, another perfectly characteristic response to perceived threat, combined with limited understanding. A contest, involving dreams and masks. This has all the hallmarks of one of your schemes gone awry. Your lack of faith wounds me deeply, Loki replied with exaggerated injury, falling automatically into their familiar pattern of interaction. When have my schemes ever gone awry? Would you prefer the list chronologically or by magnitude of resulting catastrophe? The construct retorted with such perfect Thor-like exasperation that Loki actually laughed aloud. Mervan observed this exchange with head tilted in apparent interest. Most impressive, the Dream Guardian acknowledged. Your construct displays appropriate personality traits, consistent reasoning patterns, and contextually suitable responses. However, here the mask tilted toward Loki directly. Replication is not the same as creation. You have copied what exists rather than fashioning something truly new. Before Loki could protest this assessment, the Thor construct interrupted with predictable directness. What nonsense is this masked one speaking, Loki? I am no construct, but Thor, son of Odin, prince of Asgard and god of thunder. Though a brief flicker of confusion crossed the handsome features, I confess I cannot precisely recall how I came to be in this strange garden. Of course you can't, Loki sighed, because you are indeed a construct. A temporary consciousness I have created for purposes of this challenge. You possess Thor's personality and mannerisms because I fashioned you from my knowledge of my brother. But you are not truly him. The construct's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and outrage, all consistent with how Thor would react. You speak madness, brother. I am no illusion. I think my own thoughts, feel my own feelings. Those thoughts are echoes of Thor's patterns, filtered through my understanding of him, Loki explained. Notice how you cannot recall any specific event prior to opening your eyes moments ago. The Thor construct frowned, distress crossing its features. I remember growing up in Asgard, fighting frost giants. But each statement ended with uncertainty. You remember concepts, not specific experiences, Loki pointed out, feeling an unexpected twinge of discomfort at the construct's existential distress. A struggle that resonated with questions about his own nature and origins. The construct looked at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. If what you say is true, then what becomes of me when your contest ends? Do I simply cease? The question caught Loki unprepared. Before he could respond, Mervyn intervened. Our dreams end, the Dream Guardian stated gently. Yet ending is not the same as never having been. Your existence has meaning in the pattern of the greater dreaming. Nothing created is ever truly lost to the cosmic memory. The Thorkenstripe considered these words with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. Then I shall make the most of this existence, it decided, squaring its shoulders in a gesture reminiscent of Thor facing adversity. How may I assist in your contest, brother? Even as a dream, a son of Odin does not abandon family. This unexpected offer rendered Loki momentarily speechless. The construct had transcended its template, demonstrating a capacity for growth that he had not programmed into it. Your creation has exceeded its parameters, Mervyn observed, eyes now a deep blue. You have inadvertently introduced an element of self-awareness that the original lacks. The ability to confront fundamental questions of existence without resorting to denial or rage. An unintended consequence, Loki admitted with new appreciation. But not an unwelcome one. The most profound dream craft often emerges from unplanned confluences, Mervyn observed. I judge this challenge completed successfully, though perhaps not in the manner you initially intended. Loki inclined his head in acknowledgement of both the success and the implied criticism. Growth comes in unexpected forms, even for those who believe themselves masters of change. Indeed, Mervyn agreed, which brings us, appropriately, to our final challenge. The Dream Guardian extended both hands, causing the garden scene to dissolve once more. The Thor construct faded with it, offering Loki a final nod of acceptance that struck him as simultaneously familiar and utterly foreign to his brother's usual demeanor. The environment reformed into something entirely different, a vast chamber whose walls, floor, and ceiling were composed entirely of mirrored surfaces, creating infinite reflections that stretched in all directions. A single chair of simple design, remarkably similar to the one Loki had created in the first challenge, stood at the center of this reflective space. Our final challenge, Mervyn announced, tests perhaps the most crucial aspect of dreamcraft, self-acknowledge. Without understanding the dreamer, one cannot truly understand the dream. Loki approached the solitary chair with cautious interest. I assume I am meant to sit. You are meant to observe, Miravan corrected. What you observe and how you interpret it will determine your success or failure. With this cryptic instruction, the Dream Guardian stepped back, seeming to merge with the mirrored walls until only the wooden mask remained visible, floating disconnected from any body. When you believe you understand the challenge, speak your insight aloud. You have until the last reflection fades to reach your conclusion. Before Loki could ask for clarification, he noticed that the infinite reflections surrounding him had begun to change. Instead of repeating his current appearance and movements with perfect fidelity, each mirrored surface now displayed a different version of himself from various points throughout his long existence. The mirrors showed countless moments from Loki's life, a child practicing illusion spells in Asgard's gardens, an adolescent standing in Odin's shadow while Thor received Mjolnir, negotiations with dwarves, conversations with Freya about Satyr magic, countless shape-shifting pranks, and Loki seated at council, expression neutral while thoughts raced behind watchful eyes. These memories appeared randomly across the mirrored surfaces with no apparent organization. Some lasted seconds while others played through entire episodes in detail. My life reflected back at me, Loki observed, turning slowly. Is the challenge simply to endure this parade of reminiscence, or does it require some specific response? Mervyn's mask offered no guidance, but Loki noticed something important. Certain reflections periodically dimmed before brightening again, as if struggling to remain visible. Moving closer, to one fading reflection, Loki saw himself standing alone on the rainbow bridge, expression unguarded. The emotion visible was unmistakable. Loneliness, tinged with yearning that he typically concealed beneath wit and mischief. Looking around more attentively, he realized all fading reflections shared a common element. They showed moments of genuine emotional vulnerability when his carefully constructed masks had slipped. The memories I would most prefer to suppress are precisely those fighting hardest to remain visible, he murmured. This observation led to a hypothesis. Standing before another fading reflection, young Loki tearfully confessing to Frigga that he felt fundamentally different from his brother, he consciously acknowledged the emotion. I remember this, he stated clearly. The fear that difference meant deficiency, the uncertainty of where I belonged in Asgard's warrior culture. Immediately, the reflection stabilized, matching the surrounding mirrors. Testing his theory, Loki approached another dimming scene, returning from a failed diplomatic mission, facing Odin's disappointment with a facade that barely concealed genuine hurt. Pride wounded by failure, Loki acknowledged. Shame masked with indifference. Again, the reflection strengthened. Loki understood the pattern now, moving methodically through the chamber to address each struggling reflection. Some memories were easier to confront than others, but many demanded deeper honesty. Admitting jealousy of Thor's acceptance, acknowledging the pain of feeling misunderstood, confronting moments when his mischief had caused genuine harm. As Loki addressed each fading reflection, the overall pattern of memories began to organize itself. No longer random snippets scattered across infinite mirrors, the reflections arranged themselves into a coherent narrative, not strictly chronological but connected by emotional themes and developmental arcs that revealed patterns even Loki himself had not fully recognized. Time became fluid as he immersed himself in this process of acknowledgement and integration. How long he moved through the chamber of mirrors, addressing each vulnerable memory as it threatened to fade, Loki could not have said. Eventually, he realized that all reflections now shone with equal brightness, and the seemingly random assortment had resolved into a comprehensive tapestry that reflected not just isolated moments, but the complex, continuous thread of his existence. Returning to the center of the chamber, where the solitary chair still waited, Loki finally understood its purpose. He sat down, facing the most difficult reflection of all, a perfect mirror that showed him exactly as he was in this moment, stripped of all illusions and pretenses. The challenge, he stated clearly, addressing both the floating mask of Mervyn and his own reflection, is neither to alter nor escape these reflections, but to acknowledge them as integral parts of a coherent whole. Dreams, like memories, seek integration rather than suppression. What fades when denied only fights harder to return, while what is acknowledged finds its proper place in the greater pattern. The mirrored walls rippled like disturbed water, reflections blending momentarily before resolving into a single unified image that surrounded Loki completely. Himself, standing at the dreaming tree where this journey had begun, reaching for the branch that had triggered his entry into the realm of dreams. Mervyn's mask floated forward, eyes now a deep gold that matched the amber light filtering through Vanaheim's trees. Well reasoned, the Dream Guardian acknowledged. And your conclusion? Balance, Loki replied without hesitation. Dreams require neither complete chaos nor rigid control, but the wisdom to know when each serves the greater harmony. In denying aspects of dream or self, we create resistance that manifests as distortion. In acknowledging all facets equally, We achieve integration that allows for true navigation between states of consciousness. As he spoke these words, Loki realized they applied not only to Dreamcraft, but to his own approach to existence. His greatest strengths and most troubling weaknesses stemmed from the same source, his refusal to be bound by others' expectations or limitations. Yet, in rejecting external constraints, he had sometimes imposed equally rigid internal ones, denying aspects of himself that didn't fit his preferred self-imposition as the consummate trickster existing beyond normal rules and attachment. The floating mask nodded once, definitively. The third challenge is completed successfully. You have earned your passage back to the waking realm, Loki Silvertongue. The mirrored chamber dissolved around them, reality restructuring itself into a stone archway standing alone in an otherwise featureless plain. Beyond the arch, Loki could see the clearing with the dreaming tree exactly as he had left it, seemingly moments ago, though his dream journey had felt vastly longer. Muravan's form remanifested completely, no longer just a floating mask, but the same robed figure who had first intercepted Loki's attempt to take a branch from the sacred tree. "Before you depart," the Dream Guardian said, "there is the matter of what you originally sought." With a graceful gesture, Mervyn conjured a small seed that glowed with inner light. Similar to the dreaming tree's luminescence, this contains the essence you sought, though not in the form you expected. Plant it in soil, touched by both moonlight and sunrise. Water it with dew collected from 7 different flowers, and speak to it of dreams for 7 consecutive nights. What grows will serve the purpose Odin Allfather intended, though I suspect that purpose may differ from what he led you to believe. Loki accepted the seed with a mix of curiosity and renewed suspicion. You seem remarkably certain of Odin's intentions for one who exists primarily in the realm of dreams. Dreams and intentions are closely related, Murden replied enigmatically. One often reveals the truth of the other, particularly for those wise enough to interpret the symbols correctly. With this cryptic statement, the Dream Guardian gestured toward the stone archway. Your path awaits, trickster. Remember what you have learned here. It may serve you in challenges yet to come. Loki approached the archway, seed secured safely in a small pouch at his belt. At the threshold he paused, turning back to Mervyn with uncharacteristic sincerity. I seldom offer genuine thanks, he admitted, finding it generally more amusing to leave debts unacknowledged. But in this instance, your lessons were valuable, even if your methods were somewhat heavy-handed. The wooden mask tilted in what Loki now recognized as amusement. From the god of mischief, I accept this as high praise indeed. May your dreams remain ever interesting, Loki Silvertongue. With a final nod of acknowledgement, Loki stepped through the archway. The transition from dream to waking was gentler than he expected, more like walking from one room to another than the disorienting shift he had experienced when first touching the branch of the dreaming tree. He found himself standing exactly where he had begun, hand outstretched toward a branch that now seemed to wait patiently for his touch, rather than beckoning with mysterious allure. The quality of light in the clearing had not changed, suggesting that no time had passed in the waking world despite the extended journey he had experienced within the dream realms. Loki lowered his hand without taking the branch, a smile of genuine amusement crossing his features as he patted the pouch containing Mervyn's seed. Not the prize I expected, he murmured to himself, but potentially far more valuable. Well played, Dream Guardian. Turning away from the dreaming tree, Loki began the journey back through Vanaheim's enchanted forest, toward the point where he could call for Heimdall to open the Bifrost for his return to Asgard. His step was lighter than when he had arrived, his mind filled with new knowledge and perspectives gained during his dreaming duel. Whether Odin had intentionally sent him into this situation as a form of lesson, or whether the All-Father would be surprised by both the form and substance of what Loki brought back, remained to be seen. Either outcome promised its own form of entertainment, and few things pleased the god of mischief more than an unexpected twist in an otherwise predictable tale. As Loki departed, a gentle breeze stirred the branches of the dreaming tree, causing its ever-shifting leaves to whisper secrets understood only by those who had walked the boundaries between waking and dreaming. Among those secrets, perhaps, was knowledge of when the trickster god might return to continue his education in the subtle art of dreamcraft. For some lessons once begun have a way of continuing long after the formal instruction ends. The journey back through Vanaheim's forests seemed both shorter and more pleasant than Loki's initial trek. Colors appeared more vivid, scents more distinct, and the subtle magic permeating the realm registered as fascinating rather than unsettling. Whether this change stemmed from actual differences in the environment or merely his altered perception following the dream experience, Loki couldn't determine with certainty, nor did he particularly care. The boundary between objective reality and subjective experience had proven more permeable than he had previously acknowledged, an insight that expanded rather than limited his understanding of both himself and the 9 realms. When he reached a suitable clearing, Loki looked skyward. Heimdall, he called, knowing the all-seeing guardian would be watching for his signal. I am ready to return to Asgard. The rainbow bridge of the Bifrost descended almost immediately, enveloping Loki in its prismatic energy and drawing him upward through the branches of Vanaheim's ancient trees, across the vast emptiness between realms, and finally depositing him on the golden observatory, where Heimdall stood eternal watch. As you return earlier than expected, the gatekeeper observed, his golden eyes studying Loki with their usual inscrutable intensity. And changed, though I cannot precisely name how. But Loki offered a slight bow that managed to be simultaneously respectful and ironic. Perhaps some changes defy even your remarkable perception, Heimdall. Or perhaps what seems changed is merely revealed more clearly than before. Rather than engaging with this philosophical deflection, Heimdall simply nodded toward the rainbow bridge extending from the observatory to Asgard's golden city. The All-Father awaits your report in the throne room. Of course he does, Loki murmured, unsurprised that Odin already knew of his return. Whether through Heimdall's immediate notification or some other means of awareness, the All-Father's omniscience within his realm remained impressively thorough, if occasionally inconvenient for those who preferred to choose the timing of their audiences. The walk across the Bifrost gave Loki time to consider how to present his experiences. Complete honesty seemed unnecessarily revealing, while fabrication risked underestimating Odin's knowledge. A carefully curated version of events would serve his purposes best, a familiar approach that felt subtly different after confronting his vulnerabilities in the mirror chamber. The guards admitted him to the throne room without delay. Odin sat upon Hlidskjalf, Gungnir at his side, his expression unreadable beneath his silver-white beard. Loki, the All-Father acknowledged, as his adopted son approached with a formal bow. You returned from Vanaheim sooner than anticipated. Did you encounter difficulties locating the dreaming tree? The tree itself proved simple to find, Loki replied smoothly. It was the acquisition of what you sought that presented unexpected complexities. Odin's single eye studied him intensely. Explain these complexities. Loki recounted a version of events that omitted personal revelations while emphasizing the skill required to navigate the dream realms. He described Myrvin as a guardian, the challenges as tests of worth, and presented the seed as a reward rather than an alternative. The Dream Guardian assured me this would serve your purpose, Loki concluded, showing Odin the luminous seed, though he suggested your purpose might differ from what you expressed to me. To Loki's surprise, Odin's features relaxed into what might almost be called a smile. Myrvin's perception remains as acute as ever. The All-Father accepted the seed. This will indeed serve my purpose, which was never to acquire a branch, but rather to ensure you encountered its guardian. You intended for me to be trapped in the dream realms? Loki asked, genuine indignation coloring his voice. I intended for you to learn what only the dream realms could teach, Odin corrected. Myrvin has guarded the boundaries between waking and dreaming since before my father's time. His wisdom concerning reality and illusion exceeds even that taught in Asgard's most secret libraries. Loki absorbed this with mixed emotions. Being manipulated was irritating, yet the value of what he had gained could not be denied. You might simply have suggested I seek Myrvin's tutelage directly. Would you have done so? Odin countered, his eye twinkling. Or would you have dismissed such counsel as unnecessary for one already so accomplished in illusion? The question was rhetorical. Loki's pride would indeed have led him to reject instruction from an unfamiliar entity. Your methods remain subtle, All-Father, Loki acknowledged with reluctant respect. Though I wonder what you intend to do with that seed. What grows from it will find its place in the gardens adjacent to your mother's chambers, Odin explained, where dreamic knowledge is valued for its own sake, rather than merely for practical application. The mention of Frigga, the one being in Asgard whose wisdom Loki respected without reservation, softened his lingering irritation at having been maneuvered into Myrvin's tutelage. If the seed and whatever grew from it would please his mother, perhaps the roundabout journey to acquire it had additional merit beyond the knowledge he had gained. I trust you found the experience enlightening, despite its unexpected nature. Odin continued, his tone suggesting the audience was drawing to a close. Loki considered his response carefully, settling on a truth that revealed less than it might have, while still acknowledging the value of what had transpired. I found it clarifying, he admitted. Certain boundaries I had considered absolute have proven more permeable than I realized, while others I dismissed as arbitrary have demonstrated unexpected purpose. Odin nodded, apparently satisfied with this assessment. Such insights are the beginning of wisdom, not its conclusion. I suggest you reflect further on what you experienced in the dream realms, particularly concerning the nature of self and the recognition of those parts we prefer to keep hidden. The specific reference to the challenge of the mirrored chamber confirmed what Loki had suspected. Odin knew far more about his experiences with Myrvin than he had revealed in his carefully edited account. Whether through prior arrangement with the Dream Guardian or some other means of observation, the All-Father had witnessed or been informed of Loki's confrontation with his own vulnerability and subsequent integration of those suppressed aspects of himself. Rather than acknowledging this insight directly, Loki offered another formal bow. Your counsel is, as always, worthy of consideration. If there is nothing else you require of me, you are dismissed, Odin confirmed with a slight incline of his head. though I believe your mother would welcome an account of your journey should you find time to visit her gardens before sunset." "I shall make time," Loki promised, this commitment entirely genuine. Of all beings in the 9 realms, Frigga alone could be trusted with an unvarnished account of his experiences in Vanaheim's dream realm, including those revelations he preferred to keep from Odin's all-seeing eye. As Loki turned to depart the throne room, Odin's voice stopped him once more. "Loki!" When he looked back, the Allfather's expression had softened further, showing a rare glimpse of the father beneath the king's formal demeanor. "Dreams reveal truths that waking minds often deny. Remember this when you find yourself once more at a crossroads between what appears to be and what truly is." With this cryptic advice lingering in the air between them, Odin gestured his final dismissal. Loki departed the throne room with measured steps, mind already turning over the multiple layers of meaning contained in the Allfather's parting words. Was it simple philosophical reflection, or had Odin foreseen some future moment when the distinction between illusion and reality would prove crucial to Loki's path? Such questions would need to wait for their answers. For now, the gardens beside Frigga's chambers beckoned, where afternoon light would soon begin its transition toward evening, painting Asgard's golden spires with the amber glow that so resembled Vanaheim's eternal twilight. There, among blooms both mundane and magical, he would share his tale with the one being whose understanding transcended judgment, and perhaps, in that sharing, discover yet deeper meaning in what he had experienced during his dreaming duel. As Loki made his way through Asgard's magnificent corridors toward his mother's gardens, he found himself unusually attentive to details he typically overlooked. The precise patterns of light through stained glass windows, the subtle variations in the golden architecture, the complex harmonies of distant conversations and activities throughout the palace. The heightened awareness he had developed in the dream realm seemed to persist, transforming the familiar surroundings of his home into something simultaneously known and newly discovered. Perhaps this, more than any specific lesson or skill, was the true gift of his journey through Vanaheim's dreams. The recognition that reality itself contained depths and nuances that remained invisible until one learned precisely how to look for them. And for Loki, god of mischief and master of illusion, such insight might prove the most valuable treasure of all, hidden in plain sight like the most elegant of tricks, waiting for the moment when its true worth would finally be revealed. Our Viking tale has now concluded. You will now hear the peaceful sounds of a crackling fire and gentle ambient noises that will continue throughout the night without any interruptions, helping you drift into a deep and restful sleep. May the stars of the northern sky watch over you, and may you find peaceful rest until the morning light. Sleep well, and good night.